On today's show, we are joined by a lawyer and a business owner by the name of Jonathan Goldstein. Again, folks, his name is Jonathan Goldstein, and he's a business owner and an attorney who's decided to sue the government over a forced coronavirus closure of his business. And on today's show, he explains why he's suing and why you have the right to do more than just a healthy amount of booing if the government is screwing you and your business and forcing you to be shut down. This show is profound. This show breaks down the details of the First Amendment right that we all have to peaceably assemble. This show provides you some legal justification for that frustration you've been feeling across this nation. If your business has been deemed to not be essential, it is super essential that you listen to today's show and today's interview. Again, with a man with a plan, a lawyer and businessman by the name of Jonathan Goldstein. Psychologically prepare yourselves and buckle up as we enter into the dojo of mojo with Jonathan Goldstein right here on the Thrive Time Show.
Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we hit. We started from the bottom and we'll show you how to get here. We started from the bottom, now we hit. We started from the bottom, now we hit.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top. Teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of five, that's why I'm alive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the C&Z up on your radio. And now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we hit. We started from the bottom and we'll show
Yes, 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 and probably not. Probably not a good thing. Probably not a good thing when our country is mandating certain businesses to be shut and certain businesses to be open. Probably not a good thing. And so on today's show, I wanted to interview a man who has been negatively impacted by the coronavirus mandatory shutdown of not all businesses, but certain businesses. Jonathan Goldstein, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Clay.
Two thrivers that I respect very well, two thrivers who are doctors, reached out to me and said, you need to have this guy on the show right away. So we emailed you. Thankfully, you were nice enough to allow us to interview you. And what I'd like to do, if I can, is I want to ask the questions that somebody would maybe want to ask to either build up or to destroy your credibility, and that way you can share the whole story here. So can you share who you are and what you were doing for a living previous to the systemic shutdown of certain industries? Like, what do you do for a living?
Sure. So I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur. I happen to be an attorney, and I have a law firm here in Pennsylvania. I also buy and turn around small American manufacturing companies. So I have 3 small manufacturing companies that I own. One of which was deeply impacted by the shutdown, and I do a couple other things. I'm a pilot. I'm a commercial pilot, actually. So a bit of a polymath, but I was mostly just minding my own business, tending to my garden, and keeping my businesses going until this Corona thing came along and really upset the apple cart, particularly in the way the governor of Pennsylvania implemented some of these shutdowns.
Now, what do you? I guess. What would you say to somebody out there that maybe doesn't know about your reputation? How long did you go to college? Where did you go to school at? I just want you to be able to kind of share your background a little bit before we get into the current story of what you are doing to make things right.
Sure. So, I'll give you the 30-second thumbnail coming forward. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, for my undergraduate degree. I was recruited there actually as a nationally competitive fencer out of high school in New Jersey. And went to Penn, graduated, went down, helped a friend in Houston, Texas to start an internet startup. Ultimately did that for a little while, and then came up and was doing some software consulting here in Pennsylvania, built a software company, sold it, went back to law school, and then helped some guys with a business that was doing outsourcing of U.S. legal work to India. And we sold that company after about 7 years of working in that industry. And then, I was a lawyer and figured, what am I going to do next? And I started buying and turning around small manufacturers. I believe in American enterprise. I believe in American entrepreneurship. And my grandfather had been in the manufacturing industry, and I decided I wanted to be in manufacturing as well. So started buying and turning around small manufacturers.
How long did you go to school to become an attorney?
So undergrad was 4 years, and then I went back actually to the University of Pennsylvania for law school for 3 more years. So a total of 7 years at Penn. Very expensive.
Having been self-employed for 23 years and having just met you, I understand that anytime you hop on a podcast or a media appearance, people love gotcha questions. So I'm not going to ask you gotcha questions, but I'm going to ask sincere questions on behalf of our listeners who maybe don't have a full understanding of the law in the way that maybe they should. So here we go.
Sure.
There's this controversial document that we call the United States Constitution. Can you please explain to the listeners, mainly me, on a third grade level? Feel free to use sock puppets if you need to. Why do we need a constitution? Like, what's the purpose of a constitution?
So this is so simple that even a politician could understand it, right?
Yep.
A constitution is a document that governs the relationship between a people and the government that those people establish. People establish governments to improve their circumstances and to set out certain limits on the governments that those people create. And the way we express those limits in the United States in our federal constitution is we describe our federal constitution as one that creates a government of limited enumerated powers. So it doesn't have authority to do everything.
Yep.
Some things are left to the states or to the people respectively.
Got it.
And it has certain enumerated powers that we've given it as a federal government.
Enumerated. Can we dwell on that word for just a second? When you say enumerated, maybe you might have lost somebody there. A lot of syllables. A lot of entrepreneurs like me, we've been running businesses. We haven't been reading the Constitution a whole lot. What does it mean when you say enumerated?
So when powers of a government are enumerated, in short, it means there's a list.
Oh, okay.
You can do A, B, C, D, E, and F, but nothing else.
Got it.
Right? Now, over the years, the Supreme Court has taken that enumerated list and created some openings in it that you could drive a truck through. But as originally conceived, and hopefully as it eventually again will be, our federal government is a government of limited powers that we have specifically granted it, and no other powers.
Now, I was reading this controversial concept, and if I'm saying something that's not real, that's hyperbole, you can gong me. When a president, before he takes office, he's supposed to take an oath or maybe a affirmation where he says something to the effect of, "I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States." So I was reading through this controversial document called the Constitution, and as an ignoramus of the Constitution, I thought to myself, maybe I should start with the First Amendment. Maybe I should do that. Now, I first read the Constitution when I was, really read it and thought about it when I was 20 years old. Okay, so we're going back 19 years ago. But in the First Amendment, it reads, and I'm going to read it, not paraphrasing, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." So I was thinking about taking my kids to church on Easter, as I often do, and it occurred to me that I could not peaceably assemble. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I should get the old Google out. So I Googled it. I found the First Amendment, and there it was. It said right there. I thought maybe I misremembered it. Maybe it was one of these President Clinton misremembered having sex with Monica Lewinsky. Some people misremember things. I've misremembered things in the past. We've all forget things. And I thought maybe I misremembered. But could you explain to me what it means when it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble? What does that mean?
Well, if I weren't a modern politician, I would tell you it means exactly what it says, right?
Oh.
So let's break it down word by word.
Let's do it.
Congress shall make no law, right? What that means is that the federal Congress cannot make any laws that establish a particular state religion here in the United States, or that prohibit people from exercising their own religious convictions. Separately, Congress cannot abridge free speech or a free press or stop people from peacefully gathering to ask their government to address their legitimate concerns. So the jurisprudence, right, the legal wrangling in the courts and the outcome that the courts generate, we call that jurisprudence.
Yes.
On each of those respective clauses is a little different. I can tell you that if you're concerned with some of the other rights that are in this Bill of Rights, you're on the first right now.
Yep.
But if you talk about the second or the fourth or the fifth, the way that courts historically, certainly in the more modern era since the beginning of the 20th century,
yeah,
they put a lot more weight and a lot more scrutiny, if you will,
yep,
on the way the government violates the First Amendment than it does on a lot of the other amendments.
So
Gives them a free pass on the others.
Free pass. Now this is something I want to. I was thinking about this. I thought, I don't know, 8 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, there was this report that was being rumbled about. People were talking about it. They're kind of mumbling about it. And I don't go on social media. I run companies. But somebody said to me, I'll never forget this. They said, I remember this, a true story. Somebody said to me, they said, Clay, what are you doing at your men's grooming lounge, at your barber shops? We have 5 locations. What are you doing to help protect your customers from the coronavirus? And I thought to myself, what do you mean? They said, well, the European guy, the scientist, he said 2.2 million Americans are going to die. And I said, because I'm a crazy person, I said, what is his name? And they said, what? And I said, what is his name? They said, what? I said, the person who wrote the report, what is his name? And they go, I don't know, but I'm telling you, it's coming. I said, what's it? It's coming. So I looked up the man who came up with the report, and his name is Neil Ferguson. And I thought, well, we should consider the source. Where's Neil from? Is he from South Carolina? Is he from North Carolina? Which one of these 50 states is he from? Maybe he's from Alaska, Canada. Maybe he's from Rhode Island. I've never met someone from Rhode Island. Maybe he's from there. I don't know. And then I discovered his job title as of today is he's the director of the Abdul Latif Jameel Institute for Disease and Emergency Analytics. And I thought to myself, okay, I wonder where that organization is based. Turns out it's a Saudi Arabian-based organization that was founded 5.5 months ago. Turns out he predicted 2.2 million American deaths. Turns out he predicted 500,000 British people may die. And then I watched the news. I'm a crazy person. I watched the news, and Dr. Deborah Birx gets up there, and this is what she said. Here's the audio of Dr. Deborah Birx. She says this. Here we go.
About them adjusting
Let me back it up.
and are negative. These are really important facts for the American people.
Here we go.
I'm sure many of you saw the recent report out of the UK.
Quick correction. I think many of you saw the report out of Abdul Latif Jameel Institute for Disease and Emergency Analytics written by Neil Ferguson. I just want to make sure we know who wrote it. Here we go.
About them adjusting completely their needs. This is really quite important. If you remember, that was the report that said there would be 500,000 deaths in the UK and 2.2 million deaths in the United States. They've adjusted that number in the UK to 20,000. So 500,000 to 20,000.
Now, Jonathan, I got out my calculator, and you as an attorney would probably do this better than me. I've never even used this device before as a simple-minded entrepreneur. And so I discovered, I looked at the number, and it looked as though 500,000 deaths was the initial prediction in the UK, and now they're down to 20,000. And I thought, well, it looks like there's probably 25 times more deaths than they thought. No, wait, 25 times less. Uh-oh. And so I was alarmed that he was off by that much in the numbers. When you're an attorney or when you do your American manufacturing, have you ever misquoted a customer by 25 times?
It's certainly a pretty gigantic error, particularly when you decide to shut down, the economy of an entire country or several countries or a globe and, destroy wealth and destroy prosperity and destroy happiness and security for people everywhere. You'd like to think that you wouldn't be off by 25x.
And I thought, let's just assume that Neil Ferguson has your best interests. And let's say that the fact that he works with the Saudi Arabians who are currently involved in a price war has nothing to do with this. Let's just say we are Neil Ferguson apologists. He's off by 25 times, folks. He said 2.2 million people may die. Now he's down to 61,000 potentially may die. And then Dr. Deborah Birx immediately runs over to President Trump, and she says this. Here's audio of what Dr. Deborah Birx said to President Trump. This is told by President Trump himself. Here we go.
4 weeks ago, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world, the greatest in the world, greatest in the history of the world. We had the most jobs ever in the history of the United States, almost 160 million jobs, right? And then one day, I get a call from Deborah, who's fantastic.
Dr. Deborah Birx.
And from Dr. Fauci. And he said, and she said, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? And they said, we may have to close it up. I said, close what up? They said, close up the country.
And so I happen to have friends who hold the highest offices in the various states. I know people who are, in charge. We've had the head of NASA on the show. We've had senators, congressmen. And I said, so certain states are shutting down. Is the president shutting down the states? They said, no, the local governors, the local mayors, they're all shutting the states down. And I'm like, is that legal? Can we do that? And so you find yourself, I find myself, many of us find ourselves today in a spot where we can no longer peaceably assemble. And President Trump is wanting to open the country on May 1st. He keeps talking about this. And these reporters are saying, I have a question. How can you do that? And he points out things like the Constitution and the First Amendment, which they've never read. They're not aware of these things. And so you decided to react in a very different way. And the article that was sent to me today about you was a client sent me an article that said a business owner is suing the government over the coronavirus closure order. Can you explain what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing?
Of course. So the governor of Pennsylvania has certain emergency powers that were granted to him by our General Assembly, which is our legislature. And among those powers is the authority, under certain conditions, to direct that businesses close or that people be quarantined and so forth. And the governor of Pennsylvania, using that legitimate power granted to him by our General Assembly, decided that he would close certain businesses. Now, there are two problems with the way he went about it. Number one, the process that he used to select which businesses to close was what we call arbitrary and capricious, right? He picked businesses according to a totally inscrutable set of criteria that they never published, using a process that doesn't provide any of the protections that federal courts have said must be provided when the government is taking actions that affect fundamental rights, like the use of your property and the right to assemble and so forth. So that's the first problem. The second problem that with Governor Wolf's legitimate use of this legitimate public power to close businesses and direct people on an emergency basis. The second problem is that he didn't provide for any compensation for the people whose properties he took. In the case of the business owners, it's their businesses.
Got it.
In the case of the workers, it's their jobs. They were seized. Their jobs and businesses were seized. And he is not offering compensation to the people whose property he took. That is prohibited under the Fifth Amendment to the federal Constitution.
The what amendment of the Constitution?
Fifth.
Can you educate us about the fifth? Because, again, I only went into the first one, and we needed some people to help us break that down. And, again, a lot of our listeners, I mean, we are the kind of people that own businesses. You know, we own companies. We have about 500,000 listeners out there that own businesses. And a lot of times politicians say stuff. I want to play this audio for you just real quick, because this is amazing. This is Deborah Birx explaining how the math was so off. Just listen to her tone. This is beautiful, beautiful. Here we go.
Looking into this in great detail to understand that adjustment.
Here it goes.
I'm going to say something that's a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try to do it in a way that we
Get out the sock puppets, because I can't follow you, Deborah. Here we go.
can all understand it together.
Oh.
In the
Like there's a kind of a condescension. Anytime that you ask these questions, they say, "What are you, an infectious disease expert? What are you, an attorney?" In your case, you could say, "Yeah, I'm an attorney." But in my case, I can't. So please explain what the Fifth Amendment's all about.
Sure. So the Fifth Amendment, like the First, covers a lot of different things. For present purposes, for our purposes, the language we're focused on is that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So the due process of law piece I talked about, it's the first objection we had to it, right? His process for picking businesses was arbitrary. For example, he closed foundries, right, which are a foundational part of the manufacturing infrastructure in Pennsylvania. Foundries were closed because they're non-essential, but beer distributors remained open. So we'd like to talk about how we determined that beer distributors were essential, foundries were not. The other thing that he did is he had a family business that was a cabinet making business. Now, he had since sold out of it, but it was affiliated with him, and the breadcrumbs led from him back to his business. That business got a waiver to keep running, even though it was non-essential. So too did a candy company that was owned by the president of the Pennsylvania Senate. Right? They got waivers to operate, but we have clients that have foundries that didn't get them. We have clients that are auto dealerships that couldn't get waivers to operate, but several large corporate chains of car dealerships did get waivers to operate. So all of that speaks to the arbitrary and capricious nature of the criteria they used to select which businesses would open. In terms of the second clause that I read you, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation, right? There's several analytical elements to that clause, right?
Right.
Private property, right? What is private property? My businesses, my workers' jobs, right? Those are private property. Were they taken? Well, there's a line of cases that governments use to justify taking private property. They say, oh, no, we have this police power. We can occasionally, take private property and not have to compensate people for it, despite the clear language of the Constitution. And courts have sort of erected a line of cases where they say, yeah, that's actually right. Even though it says you can't take private property without just compensation, we're going to invent a whole category of cases where you can take private property without just compensation. And those are called the police powers cases. And then finally, for a public use without just compensation. Well, Governor Wolf didn't close my business. He didn't tell my workers to go home for my purposes, right? Meaning that wasn't something we called, Jonathan, I'm going to help you out.
Yep.
Hey, workers, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to close this business. No, we certainly benefited from the closure in that we are members of the public. The businesses were closed. If you look at the orders where he closed various non-essential businesses, what he called non-essential businesses, he closed them for a public purpose, and that was to protect health. And therefore, as a result of that, he owes just compensation, which is damages for the fact that these businesses were closed.
Okay, so I'm following your logic here, and I feel like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, maybe you should have context on this because you are in the great state of Pennsylvania. In Oklahoma, if you wanted to plan a fun quarantine, like an outing, let's say you've traveled to Tulsa, Jonathan, and you came here for business, for essential business. And I said, let's plan a fun outing, like you and me. Let's go. I want to take you on the town. I made a list of some cool stuff we could do today if you wanted to. One, we could go to a medical marijuana dispensary today, you and me, and we could get a card within about 5 minutes. We could just say we have a headache and we're getting a card, and we could smoke pot till our brains explode.
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
I think we're parked, man.
Yeah.
Feel all right, huh? Hey, listen, can we get off this street, man? Listen, we're parked in a bad spot.
That's heavy, man.
The cops just went by, man.
And then we could go to the liquor store, and we could kind of giggle the whole way there. We could go to the liquor store, and then if we wanted to, we could get in a crowded lobby at an abortion clinic and look into how much their fees are. We could do all of that today, but we can't get our hair cut. We couldn't go work out at a gym. So you've taken action. Are you actually in the process of suing the government? What are you doing?
So we filed a lawsuit in federal court in Philadelphia in what's called the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is broken into 3 federal districts, Eastern, Middle, and Western. And we filed a lawsuit in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. As soon as we filed it, the calls started rolling in. Two kinds of calls. One was angry phone calls, people saying, you're a monster.
Oh.
The governor has to be able to do what he's doing. The second kind of emails we've been getting are people saying, oh my God, me too.
Yes.
My business got shut too. It ruined my life too.
Right.
It hurt me too. My workers were hurt, or it's workers writing to us saying, I'm over here suffering. They were told to file for unemployment. They filed for unemployment the day we had to lay them off. Many of them still haven't even gotten their first check.
Hey,
These are
check
not
this
people
out.
with tons of savings.
Check this out. Forbes says the average American is 78% of Americans, according to Forbes, 78% of Americans are check to check. 78% of Americans are check to check. And the SBA came out with this little fabulous press conference. Let me cue up the audio here real quick. This is the press conference from the Small Business Administration.
Your lenders, any FDIC institution will be able to do this. Any credit union, existing SBA lenders, and fintech lenders. You get the money, you'll get it the same day.
Andrew, this came out weeks ago. How many of your clients were funded the same day that they applied for the Paycheck Protection Program?
Absolutely none of them.
How many have not received payment or funding still? I mean, of the 35, 36 clients you work with, business owners, how many have still, I guess how many have received funding?
2 out of 36.
2 out of 36.
Yep.
Many banks are telling people they're out of money, they don't have money. Chase, Bank of America aren't returning calls.
We're working on it.
If we want to team up with you, if our listeners want to team up with you, are you going to make this a class action lawsuit, or what are you going to do? How can our listeners get involved and support you?
So we have a class action lawsuit. We have asked for a class to be declared. But one of the things that's happened since we started to get these calls from supporters is we're rethinking both where to file the suit and who to include. We may not actually become a class anymore. We may go in a different direction. This is thinking from late this afternoon.
Yeah.
But we've had people from all over the state who called us, and the right place for this suit might not be in Philadelphia anymore because we've got people from all over the state.
Yep.
So stay tuned. We're going to try to hold the governor accountable for what he's done, and he has to provide compensation to the workers whose jobs he seized and to the business owners whose properties he seized.
So, I mean, if a business went out of business that was once on paper worth $1.5 million, you're saying the governor might have to write a check for $1.5 million.
Well, the measure of damages is something we're going to have to talk about once we get there. First, we have to get a court to say, they should have compensated. So we got a long road ahead of us to get to that place. But we think it's the right conversation to be having in federal court.
Yep.
We think that the governor ought to be able to articulate what the limits are on his ability to shut a business like this, right? Could he tell us all to stay home for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Where are the limits, right? If this is something they can just do, and we'll get back to you when we're ready to get back to you and let you know when it's over, the fact that there's no cost attached to that for them really is not reflective of all of the inputs that ought to go into a decision about whether to shut down an economy, right? Health considerations, totally vital, totally important, top of the list. But there's other considerations as well, and they shouldn't just be taken off the table. They should be at the table. We should be talking about these other considerations. We have to have an economy to come back to when the health considerations are resolved.
I don't want to discredit and or dismiss the level of severity in Pennsylvania. I just want to point out we have about 500,000 listeners to this show. Many are in Pennsylvania, many are in California, many are in Florida. If they want to reach out to you to learn more about getting involved or to support you, or to maybe sign a petition or to sign something or to get involved, what's the best way they can do that? Is that something they can do?
Yeah, they can head over to our website, which is www.goldsteinlp.com. That's goldsteinlp.com. There's a link on there for sending us an email. If they want to send us an email, we'd be happy to hear from people who want to support us. Certainly, if people want to donate money to it, they're welcome to send us an email. We'll send them a link where they can do that. But fundamentally, our website's a great place to stay abreast of developments in the case.
I appreciate you very much for hopping on the show and breaking down the knowledge in a non-condescending way. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm sorry your business has been impacted. I know mine has, and yours has, and so many of our listeners have. I don't think anybody listening hasn't been impacted by this. And again, just thank you for taking the time for joining us tonight and for making the poor life decision to be on our podcast.
Look, it's been my pleasure, and I just can't tell you how grateful I am to come on and talk about this topic. We got a number of people all over the country, all over Pennsylvania, working hard to resolve this very serious health crisis. That's not my remit, right? That's not my job. My job is to think about some other things. And one of those things that I'm thinking about is we've got to have an economy to come back to once our best experts have figured out a way to resolve this health crisis. And so I'm hopeful they'll get that done in short order. And then entrepreneurs like you and like me will get this economy rebooted and put America back to work.
Brother, I appreciate you so much. Jonathan, hope you have a great rest of your night. Again, folks, if you want to get involved, go to goldsteinlp.com. That's G-O-L-D. That's Goldstein, S-T-E-I-N, LP.com, goldsteinlp.com. Again, thank you, Jonathan, for being on the show. Hope you have a great rest of your evening. And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom! Over the years, has it been a struggle to grow your business? Are you just kind of struggling to put everything you're learning together into a cohesive plan that you can actually implement? That sounds like me. What if you had access to a step-by-step proven plan taught by a business coach with a proven track record of helping thousands of entrepreneurs just like you to increase their profitability on a month-to-month basis? And what if my business coaching program had actually been coaching clients since before the Great Recession? What if you are working with a coach who knows how to coach you through difficult times? And imagine if this program was actually affordable. I'm talking about super affordable, like in a perfect world affordable, like less money than it would cost you to hire even one minimum wage full-time employee.
Yeah. Let me talk to the manager.
At a time where Inc. magazine now reports that by default, 96% of businesses will fail within 10 years, my clients grew last year at a rate of 104%. Yeah, 104%. But can you prove it? Check out thrivetimeshow.com and click on testimonials to see the faces of my real clients and to hear their real stories about how they've really grown their businesses. These are real people just like you, real moms, real dads, real daughters, real men and women that have actually grown their companies, on average by 104% this past year. How's that possible? Well, I personally take the time to write each and every business plan, which is why I only take on 160 clients. I then use my team to help you execute your plan for your business. And my team is great, including graphic designers, photographers, and videographers, web developers, search engine optimizers, and accounting coaches to help you get on top of your numbers. And they do all of this for less money than it would cost you to hire even one full-time minimum wage employee. Does it sound too good to be true? Just visit thrivetimeshow.com and click on the testimonials button and you'll see their stories. You'll see real people now having huge success. Schedule your one-on-one consultation with me right now by going to thrivetimeshow.com. Again, that's thrivetimeshow.com. Schedule your 13-point assessment with me. I'm going to spend about a half hour to an hour with you to figure out where you're stuck. Well, right now I'm having a mental block. Every time I try to go on them internets and go to thrivetimeshow.com, I find myself sending myself an MP3 via my new fax machine app on my new phone. Well, in that case, we probably can't help you, but for everybody else, we should be fine. Just go to thrivetimeshow.com and schedule a one-on-one consultation with me. I'm going to figure out your biggest limiting factors. I'm going to go through a 13-point assessment with you to find out where you're stuck, where your growth opportunities are, and I'm going to take the time needed to type out a step-by-step plan that we're going to help lead you down together. This is going to be your year to thrive, but you have to schedule that 13-point assessment right now by going to thrivetimeshow.com. Now, recently, my good friend John Lee Dumas from the Entrepreneurs on Fire podcast, which is one of the top 5 business podcasts of all time, he reached out to me and said, Clay, I'd like to have you on my show, and I'd like to ask you about why you coach your clients. And so now, without any further ado, here's the audio clip of John Lee Dumas interviewing me about why I continue to coach clients after all these years.
You've long ago achieved financial freedom, achieved time freedom, and that's amazing things. And a lot of people who are listening might be like, why is this guy not on a beach in Puerto Rico, just like sipping Mai Tais and like just relaxing? What motivates you to coach your clients? What is the real reason?
Well, I got several reasons, but I believe and I know it is entirely possible to go to college, to earn a degree and to learn very little about how to earn money. In fact, as a general rule, most of the general education out there is kind of like it's like memorizing the History Channel. It's like you learned a lot about the Byzantine Empire, and it might be fascinating, but it's not wealth creating. And I grew up in a home where my dad delivered pizzas at Domino's. He worked the night shift at Quick Trip convenience stores to pay the bills. And I sincerely mean this. I thought that my father didn't like me until I was able to hire him when I was 27 years old. And I was talking with my dad, and I'm like, Dad, why were you always working? He's like, to put food on the table. Now, my dad has a college degree from Oral Roberts University. And imagine what that felt like as a kid. And a lot of your listeners can relate to this. My dad just worked his ass off constantly.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to provide. But my dad wasn't one of those dads who comes home and goes, that's right, I've been working for you. He was a quiet guy. He just worked. And from the age of 27, when I hired my dad, he's like, what do you want? What am I going to do for you, son? I said, you can just come be a dad. I'll put you on payroll. You can help me with the books. I need someone I can trust. He moved from Minnesota to Tulsa to come work with me. And when he died of Lou Gehrig's on September 5th, 3 years ago, I can honestly say I had no regrets. I got all that time with my dad. And there's so many people out there that are exchanging all of their time for very little money. And that just makes zero sense. And if you're gonna go out there today and hire a minimum wage employee, let's say you're in the great state of Michigan or something, okay? You hire an employee for $12 an hour, $11 an hour. Let's say you're in Oklahoma, you hire someone for $7.25 an hour. If you hire somebody for $12 an hour after payroll taxes and they work for you 40 hours a week for 4.3 weeks a month, that means that you're going to pay that person $2,064 a month before factoring in payroll taxes and providing them an office and all the costs of hiring them and finding them and recruiting them. And you know what I mean? There's a lot of costs, hidden costs associated with hiring somebody. And for less money than it would cost you to hire even one full-time minimum wage employee, we can change your life and we will change your life. And I am serious about it. My dad recently died, and that's not fun, but man, how terrible would my life have been if I didn't have certain key mentors in my life? And I'll tell you this, none of my mentors reached out to me. I had to go pay these people. I paid Michael Levine, the PR consultant for Michael Jackson and Prince and Nike, best-selling author Michael Levine. He worked with Charlton Heston. I paid Home Skillet $25,000 to teach me how PR works. $25,000. And it was worth every dollar of it, because now I can get my clients like Josh with Living Water Irrigation on the Kelly Clarkson Show and the Today Show, and I can get clients like OxyFresh on Fox News. I know how to do it now. But $25,000. I paid Bruce Clay, I think it was $8,000 a month for 12 consecutive months to learn how search engines work. I mean, and I'm glad I did, but JLD, that's some money right there. And I paid as I went.
That's some dough.
I paid some money. And if I was right now and I wanted to be a podcaster, I'd pay you to learn how to podcast, because it turns out you know how to podcast. And then if I didn't have the motivation to keep podcasting every day, I'd pay you whatever that fee is. I'd call and go, JLD, how'd you stay motivated when you had 2 downloads a week? Because remember that when you started, the momentum was against you. Before you met Kate, you're getting that momentum going. It's you against the world. You're recording. You got 2 downloads a week, maybe 5 a week. And then all of a sudden people go, oh, man, must be nice. And you go, yeah, I enjoyed the process, but people don't see the messy middle. The messy middle is the gap between the result that you want to get to and the dream that you just had last night. And somebody has to bridge the gap. And most people who are successful like to travel, not me. So most people who who are successful like to go on vacations, not me. They like to go to NFL games, not me. They like to go to parties, not me. They have hobbies and other interests, not me. It's just my wife, my 5 kids, and growing companies. That's all I got. If you're looking for a guy who's the most interesting man in the world, that's not me. But I live behind a wall at Camp Clark and Chicken Palace, where I myopically focus on my clients, and I feel it's a calling from the Latin word meaning the word vocation, meaning calling. I feel like I'm called to do this. And this is what I was called to do. I'm almost 40 years old. I don't know how many more years I have left on this great planet, but this is what I'm going to do. I'll be a 70-year-old doing this. And my hero in the game of business is Paul Graham. Paul Graham's my hero. If you Google search Paul Graham, he's the coach behind Airbnb, Dropbox, and Reddit. And he was the one who kind of paved the way for what I want to do. And Paul Graham's my inspiration.
Fire Nation, if you are literally not pressing pause right now and visiting thrivetimeshow.com/EOFire, check your pulse. I mean, with what Clay just shared, with the immense amount of free value that he's delivering to you on that site, it's just unbelievable. The assessment, the website check, the books, all the jazz, his passion transferred to you and your business, injecting it, especially during these crazy times, Fire Nation. This is what you need. So you know this, Fire Nation. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and you've been hanging out with CC and JLD today. So keep up that heat and head over to thrivetimeshow.com/EOFire. The next stage in your life, Fire Nation, the next stage in your business starts at the end of that URL. Hit it, make it happen. Clay, Josh, thank you both for sharing your truth, your value with Fire Nation today. For that, we salute you, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Take care.